All right, we don't have a lot of time. This workshop was originally prepared for something that was more in-depth, probably about 2 hours. So what I've decided to do in thinking about how to handle the amount of content that I have to share with you in a way that you can digest it in about 30 minutes is I've prepared the slides and I've put them online so that you can follow along and then reference back to them. And so I'm going to glide along the surface of the content, try to give you some of the key points, and then you can dig down a little deeper through the slides. So I will give you a link at the end of the presentation so that you can actually open them up and download them and review them. And then if you have any follow-up questions for me with regards to any of the areas that I'm going to be discussing, then feel free to reach out to me by email or whatever your preference is in terms of communication. So the goal of this presentation is to illustrate the tools that are needed to grow a web company using Joomla. And it could be applied to other content management system companies, but in particular, since my focus is in Joomla, I chose to really center it around that. We're going to explore different nuances of different business models. So some of the business models will overlap. Some businesses will use one, the other, or all three. I have interviewed a number of successful companies throughout the field of Joomla to get a sense of how they've become successful and the things that make them who they are today. And that includes extension developers, front-end developers, a la carte service providers, and hosting companies. So just a quick who I am. My name's Dawn Russell, and I own a company called Artisan Web and Print, which is based in southern Vermont in the United States. I have a master's degree in fine art, which gives me a little bit of a different approach to this entire business of running a web company because I know so much about art and craft. I also ran a high-end gallery in New York City on 57th and Madison, where I assisted with acquisitions, connecting clients with museums to enhance the collections, and so I've done a great deal of sales. And then finally, I went back and got additional master's level training in HTML5, CSS3, SAS, and Joomla. So I designed this presentation for you today out of a curiosity and a shared interest in discovering how businesses in the field grow into an established, sustainable, and profitable entity. To this end, I raised the question during one of the Joomla Resource Directory meetings, which at the time had 10 members, and I was the working group leader. And everyone seemed really excited about the idea of how do we talk about how you made it, how do we increase profits, how do we grow our company, how do I get to that next level, how do I develop this new extension and pay for it. So as a result of that, I said, you know what, let me take it a little bit deeper and talk to people and take all this information, combine it into something that we can all look at and hopefully grow from. So one of the main underlying things that I found from this is that some of the most successful businesses have grown out of a passion of either its primary CEO or creative director or the team that then supports it. So if there's anything you can take from this presentation, it's the idea that your business should reflect what your interests are. If you're doing something on a day-to-day basis just to make ends meet, it's never going to grow in the way that you want it to. So it's a beautiful thing, and it's a true thing, and I stand by it. So running a successful business depends upon a blend of two things: personality traits as well as acquired skill sets. So there are thousands of books out there and motivational speakers that will talk about the personality traits that make up a good business. So I'm not going to dive too deep into that, courage, leadership, taking risks, so many things that go into that. What I'm going to really try to focus on is the physical attributes or the key elements that will make this up on a day-to-day basis. All right, so let's dive in. I've begun by defining the three main business divisions found within our CMS reliant sector. Some businesses will focus on one model, while others will do two or three. So we have here our a la carte services, which include web design, making custom components for a customer, really working one-on-one with a business or someone in the public that has hired you to do a job. That can include social media marketing, website migrations, and search engine optimization. We're all familiar with that. The second main division would be hosting. So large companies that provide just a simple cPanel account or a Plesk account where you can put your company website hosting with upgrades, hosting with migrations, and hosting with support. So there's a variety of different hosting options out there, and they can be from the simple $395 a month all the way up to $1,200, $5,000 a month, depending on the level and size of your business and its needs. And then there's the companies that do pre-built products. So this would be your CVI database translation company or Hika Shop or some of these other large extension builders. So they're basically building a product that someone like myself would end up integrating into a website and then using. So again, what I'm going to be doing is showing you how all of these elements could then inform any of those CMS-reliant business models. This is a really busy slide. It has a lot of information. It's really pretty to look at, so it's a good place to start. I'll dive into each of the areas as we move along here. So as you can see, we're moving from the top left here. So the first element that we're going to look at is sales and leads. So we all know what this is. If you don't get a new sale, if you don't get a new lead, your business is done, right? So this includes marketing, proposals, and then lead generation. So the first thing to think about is who is your audience? Who is going to buy your product? What are their needs? And again, this is where you start to get into that, what is my passion? What do I want to do in life? Am I interested in coding all the time? Or do I want to work with nonprofits? Or am I interested in sustainability? Where is my love? This whole new emphasis at the conference this year is on data and how we can interpret data and use it in powerful ways. That got me excited. So my business is probably going to be shifting over the next few months because of my interest in some of these new technologies that are evolving. And that's something you want to continually define as you grow your business. So key concepts. How you present your company to the world will affect the type of client you attract. And it's critical to build your sales and marketing plan to reflect your availability, your growth trajectory, and your core competencies. So I'm not a database expert, but I'm really good at strategy, looking at information, and figuring out how it can actually have a social impact. So that would be an area where I would succeed, whereas maybe doing many-to-many relationals wouldn't be such a strong suit for me. So just a quick tip in this section, create a template for your proposals if you are working front end. You're going to find that throughout the presentation, because my orientation is the a la carte services and a little bit of maintenance and support in terms of hosting, you'll see little tips that have helped my business specifically. So having a template for your proposals is really helpful. So again, back to this point, determine your passion. So my business at this point has been built on, my background in art and my love for fine art. And so I do a lot of websites that really emphasize artistically inclined design. And then I also, having so much experience, bring in a lot of strategic thinking. And then how does it actually work in the world so that they are successful? That's very important to me. So all those things inform the work that I do. All right, so some tools for the job. So you definitely need to have a website with scope of services, okay? That's really important to targeting your client. If you are location-based, like an a la carte service where someone would want to meet with you, having something like a Google Place for Business can be very helpful, or Bing Business. I hit them all because that's an attachment for me. Using something like the Joomla resources or the Joomla extension directory. Now there's the newly launched Joomla Showcase where you can actually post your work. Really great, and for me has been a successful tool for getting a lot of leads that are international. Social media marketing, newsletter and a blog, word of mouth is huge. If you have a disgruntled client, You need to make them happy somehow, because that person will tell 16 people and they'll tell 16 people. The same thing if you have a happy client. And then just a quick little quote roller. So there's a blend of things here. You're going to see software tools. You're going to see, social tools. I use quote roller for proposals, and it really, really has been a great tool for getting a beautiful template in place and then impressing board of directors and owners of companies. So these slides, each one of these suites are broken down into more detail that really gets into the nuts and bolts. How do we go about sales? And again, this is more focused towards the a la carte. If you were focusing on sales with, a custom extension or a custom component, it might be a little different, or a hosting company. But for me, meet with the client, review the goals and objectives. So I'm going to kind of glide over these because we can't go that deep with the number of essential tools that we have. But you're welcome, again, to download those slides and take a look at them. All right, so then the next key element is design and development. So this is a huge piece for all three companies, not only designing the look and the feel of something, but how it actually works. So, I was talking to Britta last night, and she was telling me about, the wireframes that were going into this huge conceptual project that they're working on at RedWeb. That's a design. You need to do the same thing with your software if you're building software. You have to think about who is it going to be targeting, what are the long-range goals with it, and then have a good, solid design in place. Because if you just start throwing some code on a page, you're going to end up hurting yourself down the road when things start to break and it doesn't make sense and it doesn't evolve in a sustainable way. So design and development is essential when figuring out the details of how your company is going to work and the product that you're putting out there. Again, my tools, the Photoshop Suite, Creative Cloud. So that's why you see the image there. But build a product that is carefully considered from an architectural and usability standpoint for long-term stability. So that's the key that touches all three of these business models. Again, it needs to be carefully considered. You need to think about it from an architectural and a usability standpoint. If you can't figure out where the configuration settings are for a shopping cart solution, and you spend 5 hours trying to get the freaking checkout page to do one little thing, then you've lost your user because they're not going to be able to build their client out that way. So thinking about it on a micro level and then a macro level is very important. Conceptually, this is the place where creativity, strategy, and the big picture come into play. And it requires the ability to visualize the end game by translating goals and objectives into stable, intuitive, and appealing applications. Before I begin any design, I ascertain the character of the project. I think about its sense of place from a historical perspective. I analyze the current trends and comparables, and I strategize what will last the test of time with the amount of information that I have in that given moment, which is the best we can do, right? By considering the project from varying perspectives, I balance the design to address a myriad of factors. I try not to design just for something that looks good. Functionality is essential and just as important. Wireframing, architectural design, thinking about the hierarchy, which Ronnie was talking about earlier. So important. I think about the way that we have put together all of the genuses and species of the planet when I build a website. And I say, okay, the scientists have it figured out. They've got this entire system that trickles down so that we can help understand the amazing evolution of animals and plants on our planet. And so I think about that in terms of when we're working with a product, what am I trying to solve here? What are my goals? And how can that be organized in a way that a computer will understand it and a person will understand it? Put together some mock-ups, figure out what template frameworks you're going to use. My specific coding language, HTML5 and Sass with a little, not so much less. Depending on if you're a developer, it could be PHP, it could be Java, it could be a million other things. So those tools really span depending on what it is that you're doing. And then, again, this detailed slide, which you can dive into later. All right, number 3. So we've got some sales and leads. We're thinking about the client. Now we're coming up with, the design and the development of the product. Now we have to manage our time. We have to manage our resources. We have to manage our employees. This is where most businesses fail, aside from reporting and analysis, is not managing their time well. So you have all these projects that you've agreed to. They're old hat, you've got them all lined up, and then someone comes along with a $50,000 project or a $20,000 project. Are you going to leapfrog them in front of the other 10 people that are waiting for you because it's such a great project? Are you going to hire 50 people to help you get this done? How are you going to manage that time and resources? And if you don't have that in place, a tool that will help you understand what your availability is, you're going to create angry clients and you're going to fail in your business. Any successful business will depend upon a coordinated and clear schedule with milestones, tasks, and documentation of what you've done. In this phase, the scope of the project has been defined and implementation begins. It is essential to break down each project into defined milestones and associated tasks to establish real timelines to completion. In this way, you'll be able to plan your schedule and determine if and when you can take on new projects. And of course, as we all know, it's very challenging when you run your own business to balance that life and work. If you don't have time for yourself, how will you regenerate? How will you have new ideas? How will you be able to provide a level of quality that you believe in and stand behind? So you don't want to just throw in that 24-hour day. You want to be able to play music or hang out with your kids or go for a walk or run. It's really important. So by having a project management system in place, you can protect yourself from falling into that. And it always happens occasionally. I'm not saying I'm above this, but I have a band. I play every week with them. We play out at least once or twice a month. It's a great balance for me. I also love to bake and cook and go for walks, and I do those things in my life because I have a good project management system. So what are some great project management systems? This is something we can all share in. I personally use Active Collab. I've used it for years. It works really well for me because it ties in with invoicing and time tracking. And they continue to improve the product in a way that I'm really happy with. It has great reporting, so I can look back and say, okay, what are my averages per month? How much do I do quote-based? How much do I do maintenance? How much do I do quick turnaround, which I call my fires? And how much is admin? So I average that out, and I have an equation. I work it in, and then that helps me know what I can plan for. So I can say, all right, I normally get in 10 hours of quote-based work a week. I get in 8 hours of fire time. So I know not to budget 20 hours of quote-based work because I won't meet that goal. So Jira, Liquid Planner, Google Apps, synced calendars, time trackers for your devices, all really great tools. So again, detail slide. I'm going to let you guys look at that on your own time. All right, so we've got this design, we've got this development. We launched the product, it's out into the world, and then what? It's over? No, we have to have time for support and training, right? What is our documentation? Does it remind us of what we did? Because if you build a complex project, like a CCK C-Blood mixed with, a red shop, how did you configure it, and how are those things talking to one another? Or if you built a piece of software that has a new framework running it, for example, you're moving into Bootstrap 4 or using material design, you're not going to remember in 6 months what you did. I guarantee it, unless you're a wizard. So documenting what you do is really important because you can always reference back to it instead of spending 5 or 10 hours trying to dig out what did I do? Which, as you know, as you start to ramp up in production, you don't have that 5 to 10 hours for that admin work. You need to be spending it for more productive things like proposals and leads and so on and so forth. So documentation, if you are a software developer, I highly recommend having a knowledge base which is complete with up-to-date screenshots and videos of current interfaces, not things that were 2 or 3 releases ago. Having a ticket system is great, but I really love a forum because I can actually save a developer a lot of time by diving into a forum, finding the answer that I need. The better the forum, the less work for the developer. And I actually use a forum or a ticketing system in my company, I use a ticketing system, and that helps me keep track of what problems have arisen, because I get a lot of little fires like, oh, someone tried to check out and this happened or whatever. And so I just put in a ticket system. It shows me who wrote to me first, and it organizes all my emails so that I make sure that they get dealt with in a timely manner. Providing sound training and ongoing support is critical to the success of your projects and the happiness of your client. In order for your clients to successfully manage their own software or deploy a template or a piece of software, clear and informative and visually documented instructions must be provided. By supporting your customers with sound, reliable training guides, you're setting them up for success. It takes time to develop documents and videos, so make sure to factor this into your project costs and your estimate. Once the project is launched, you'll want to consider the importance of providing ongoing support via a ticketing system or forum, so information you may have overlooked is attainable by your client. We have a few tools here. Screencast, great. There's tons of things you can take pictures of your screen with. Camtasia is wonderful for training videos. WHMCS is what I use to control, because I actually take care of my clients' hosting and upgrades and maintenance. So I use that as my ticketing system. Kiena for forums, YouTube, Vimeo, we're all familiar with that. A lot of great stuff in there we can dive into later. All right, so now we've got everything in place. We've got the product launched. We've got all the support, provided a good training manual to our client. I have a Joomla 3 training manual, and it targets all of the areas that my clients always have trouble with. Pasting from Word, for example, really big problem. It can cause all sorts of breakdowns that can be easily avoided if you just create a little thing that says, hey, don't paste from Word. Use this little button in your ARC editor. So very, very simple targeted things for clients, and then whatever their specific software is, I'll develop a special guide that's like an appendix to my manual. So I'm jumping back to the training piece because I forgot to mention that. So we got everything out there, the client's happy, they've been using it. 6 months down the road, a new version of Joomla comes out, or a new version of the shopping cart comes out. And are we just gonna leave their site out there to basically get hacked? No. This is a great way to bring them in. And then of course, if you're a software developer thinking about your upgrades, your long-term maintenance of your product, that can be a real money generator for you, because if you have a subscription plan, people are going to pay into that. That's your bread and butter income over time. It's not only new sales, but reoccurring. And that, for me, inside my business, has shown a double every year. So it started at one moment, and then it doubled, and then doubled, and then doubled. Because once you've got your customer on board, if you do a good job with your product, they're going to stick with you. They're not going to leave. So, touched on some of that before I even got to it. This aspect of your business is critical to generating return investments from past customers, and it must be factored into the workflow in order to ensure that you have a longevity and lasting nature within your work. The great thing too is that long-term maintenance can then turn into redesigns if you have your customer long enough. Now, one thing to keep in mind with long-term updates is that they can quickly consume valuable time. And one of the major growing pains for myself within my company was that I was finding that my love was for the new projects, the strategy, the building, the collaboration. But as my company grew, I was spending more and more time dealing with things that were support and maintenance related. So that was when I made the decision to grow and hire employees to handle those sorts of technical details so that I could actually continue doing the things that I love. There are also a number of tools to make the process more streamlined. Thank goodness, because a couple years ago, to update a Joomla site meant you had to log into every single site and do it manually. And now we have Admin Credible, which then turned into Watchful. We have Securo now, which is here and a sponsor for the conference, which is wonderful. And then My Joomla is also doing a lot of work around that. You do have the core extension updater now, which actually lets you know when something's out of date, and your client too. So you can't get around pretending that you're not there to support them. And then you have SP Upgrade to get you from one version to the next. That's my preferred choice after exploring and seeing issues with other ones. I keep it back up, and then I use personally Amazon S3 and Glacier for storage of my backups. This provides sort of a buffer for my client to make sure that their site is secure, and it also provides for them a means for resting in the evening and myself so that I don't have to worry. I know that my backups are being taken every day. I test them regularly. I make sure that when my updates happen through something like Watchful, I go in and test 5 or 6 sites that have each software type to make sure that the upgrade went smoothly. So it just makes life so much easier. You need to have an upgrade schedule. It's very important. Because if you don't, you're going to get wrapped up in your paying day-to-day work and forget a month later that you haven't done any updates. So we have it scheduled twice a week, the beginning of each week and the end of each week, to see what's been happening. I'm very careful about updating right away unless it's a specific security patch, to make sure that the forums have a chance to get a little information, because my resources are fairly limited, and if I had 20 sites go down, that would actually be a problem for my business. Whereas other businesses can be a little more rogue and do that testing up front. I don't have that luxury. So keep your schedule in place and make sure that you do it in a way that supports what your business model is. How are we doing on time? I forgot to press my play button. Okay, good. 4 left to go. I'm doing good. All right, so billing. How many of you have 2 months of billing that you have not put out there and collected invoices on? No one? I must be really bad. So this was a real hard point for me, and I don't know if it's something personal or personality thing, but I'd be like, oh, I'm not quite done with this, or I'm not quite done with that. I'm going to wait and send the invoice when it's all done. Well, then 3 months later, I haven't heard back from the client, and I still have this outstanding hours that have not been tagged for. So I have a great bookkeeper now that rides me every 2 weeks. Where are your bills? Where are your bills? You've got hours building up. So that's just a little side story. There's a number of different ways that you can go about billing. You can do it as an hourly based company. So you basically tally up your hours for the week and you put them together and create an invoice around what you did. You can also do it so it's half day or full day chunks, and then you can do something called value-based billing, and that is actually billing based on the value of the project that the customer is getting. So I just had a client that came to me who wanted to migrate data from one platform to another, and they felt the value of that was $2,500. It was basically 6 hours of my work to get it from one database to another. But they didn't need to know that, and I didn't need to charge them $600 because they felt the value of it was $2,500. So I basically charged them that, and it worked because all the way across the board, everyone was happy at the end of it. I've heard similar situations. Polished Geek told me a story about a gentleman who wanted an e-commerce custom solution using HikaShop as a base, and was going to basically make $500,000 to $1 million a year off of this. And for her, it was about $10,000 worth of work, but she quoted him $75,000 because of the fact that it was going to return that kind of investment for him, and he was happy to pay it. So you have to sort of weigh out the scenario of how you're going to go about figuring out what your hourly rate is. And there's a lot of tools on the internet to kind of get you going in terms of figuring out what you should be charging based on your expenses. So you have your employees, you have your taxes, you have your obligations around that, your office space that you're renting or maybe paying taxes on and a mortgage on. So there's a lot that goes into an hourly rate beyond just your own salary. So you got to consider that when you think about the price for your product or what you're going to be charging your client. So your billing must cover the cost of doing business to provide you with an income. But that's not really all it should be doing. It should be providing you with a sense of security so that you can continue to grow and evolve what it is that you're interested in. So you want to think each year of, okay, I paid my bills, I paid my salary, and I have a little profit so that I can invest that back into the next thing that I want to do. Because if you're just working hand to mouth over time, then what's going to happen is you're never going to be able to evolve and establish that next new thing. You're not going to have the time or space to do that, and your business is going to get stale. One thing I want to say about billing as well, if you're a software developer, is that you have, the initial price that you charge, but again, if you can get that subscription piece going, that can be a real sustenance piece so that you're not always looking for that next new sale. So if you can factor in a design or development piece around your company to keep the people coming back, that's actually a mutually beneficial agreement. So there's some companies out there that say you can't access our forums unless you pay a subscription. Well, I don't actually agree with that, because if I've paid it in the past or paid it over 2 or 3 years and I just need a little piece of information being blocked out of that, I find very off-putting. I also find it off-putting, for example, if I contact a developer and they don't respond to me within 3 or 4 days to kind of give me some feedback about what's happening. I understand, in certain circumstances that can play out if it's Christmas or they're on vacation, but I do expect a certain level of service with that subscription. So if you're going to provide that, you just need to stand behind it and make sure you have a good product, because it is a product in and of itself. Cash flow, we talked about a little bit already. So I don't think I need to cover that again. Again, I use Active Collab to translate into invoices. WHMCS is great for subscription-based services, hosting, and other tools. FreshBooks, Harvest, Atlassian, Jira, Teamwork, Shopping Cart. These are all ways that you can collect money. We've talked about some of the details in there. All right, so we've made a bunch of money. We've got our customers returning. We've built our project. Now what? How do we analyze what we're doing? And I think a lot of businesses leave this piece out of, let me look at my profit and loss and see where I'm growing, where I'm not growing, how things are working out for me. Where is your money being made and lost, and are you doing what you want to be doing throughout the day? So again, we were talking about this long-term maintenance issue. So that was starting to eat up about 70% of my time. And for me, that's not where I wanted my passion or energy to go. And so what I decided to do, because it was actually making me money, was bring in an employee. But I could only do that through analyzing what the money was being made around that, and then determining from that part, okay, if I hire someone to handle this piece, how much can I afford to pay them? What will be supported by this piece of my business, and how can I continue to grow the business beyond that piece just covering that person's employee wages. I can't underscore enough the importance of familiarizing yourself with your numbers and paying your taxes on time. So that's another issue that people have in our small business world, is taxes. Make sure you have a good accountant who understands the nature of your business and advises you well, because if you get behind on your taxes, it can be a huge problem. Not only just from the government being mad at you, but also trying to get out of that hole. It's very, very difficult. And that's something that's come across through these conversations repeatedly. So you want to make sure that when you do get that money in, because likely, especially if you're relatively small, you're going to be like, oh, let me just take some money out and I'll think I'm fine. And you just can't work it that way. You've got to put the taxes aside. You can't touch that money. And you'll get that 1099 or whatever it is where the company says, I paid you this much. And then you're going to be caught with the bill. So one tip that I found really helpful, a profit and loss, if you're not accustomed to looking at a profit and loss, is approach it with a question in mind. So here are all these numbers. What is it that I want to know? And if you look at your profit and loss from that perspective, you'll find a lot of clarity. Different tools that you can use. Depending on your skill level, you can hire someone to do your bookkeeping, or you can get a subscription with Xero or QuickBooks, Peachtree, Sage, Quicken. Use an Excel spreadsheet, use a ledger, anything. Just keep track of your costs and your expenses, and make sure that you look back over it and see where you're trending. So probably most of you know these things, but you have your profit and loss, which shows, your overall net income, your gross, where you ended up at the end of the year. You have your balance sheets, which show where your assets lie, and that can be in, anything from furniture to, ideas and non-compete clauses. How accurate are you in your estimates versus what your actual time is on a project? Are you running over, and where are you running over? I mean, one of the areas that I kept coming back to in the beginning when I was first starting, and other companies too that I've spoken with, is the admin time. How long it takes to bill, email, put together the proposal. That actually ends up being about 20 to 25% of a project. Getting all of that information together, presenting something to the client a specification that they want to stand behind. And that's not something that you necessarily can be like, oh, I spent this long making your bill and I spent this long writing the proposal. Usually clients will raise their hackles around that. So it has to be absorbed in other ways. Growth. This is where my biggest challenge is right now, is how do you grow from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. Something that I'm working through. It starts, you're working from home, then do you get your office, then you grow into 2, then you grow into 4. How do you go about hiring people, and what's the capital that's needed? There's a lot of questions around that. So in doing this, one of the things I found is that you need to think about what your company and the values are and find a good fit. It's really important to love who you're working with, or at least enjoy them, because it's long hours in a small space typically. So you want to have a collaborative feel with that person, or whatever it is that you're into. If you like being a boss and you want to tell a bunch of people what to do all day, then that's your fit. And is your company billing at a rate that is sustainable to hire someone? So usually when you start to get into growing bigger, your rates go up because there's a lot more risk involved. So this is a major crossroad to consider as your client base and demands grow, and how do you go about hiring is a critical process that's challenging and unique for each business. So as you can see, I'm not going to go into too much depth on the growth piece because it's still an area that I'm working out for myself. And then the final piece that I think is essential is volunteering. I can't underscore enough how much I have gained personally through the process of giving back, whether it's within my community, through a local theater, donating some time, or working within the Joomla community. I've made so many great alliances and received so much good feedback and information as a result of contributing, that I feel that it's just as important as many of the other areas. It also is giving back to the project that has made your business successful. So if you're using Joomla on a daily basis and you don't do anything to contribute to the project, then it's a one-way street, and to me it seems out of balance. So I equalize that by saying, okay, what project am I going to work on next? How am I going to do something that enriches my skills but also makes the project better? It can range from speaking, sponsoring an event, participating in a working group, providing support via the forum, or writing documentation. Any skill set can be useful to the project, so simply ask where you can be useful and get involved. Typically, volunteering is not paid work. It's something that you do because you're interested in it. Although maybe some businesses pay their employees to volunteer, but I feel like it's something that you commit to personally. By contributing to an open source project like Joomla, you can foster connections while pushing the project forward. There are opportunities to plug in your skill sets to implement features and software that are important to you. Additionally, you can facilitate awareness of the project and all the benefits that it offers. I did it! 30 minutes. So are there any questions with regards to any of the areas? Yes?
How do you have time to volunteer if you have outstanding invoices?
I
don't mean to be rude, but to me it seems like
I basically think of it like a mathematical equation. So 10% is volunteer time. That's how I look at it.
Okay, then
So
from that perspective, do you also calculate out each of your business areas to know the percentage of profitability for each?
I do, yes.
Where do you find your most money in Joomla?
Well, it's a common. My biggest income source is from front-end development and design. That's my number one moneymaker. That being said, the long-term maintenance and support upgrades is slowly, I mean, not slowly, it doubles every year. So that being said, the design piece is still ahead of that, because as I get more of that, I hire people to do that piece, and then I continue to do new projects and then bring them in on those projects as well to help me. So.
I think you might have mentioned proposals as part of your sort of admin.
Mm-hmm.
And a question I had for you is, I found over the years, especially with larger projects, that I've switched from doing proposals on my own time to charging the client.
Mm-hmm.
I call it discovery or scoping.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you do that.
So that is a really great question. I'm glad you brought that up. So what I have done recently is I will give a customer a sense of cost for a project, because I have a lot of experience and I have all the reporting that's captured in my project management system. So I'll go in and I'll say, okay, how long did I spend on this project, and this project, which I see as a parallel to the new one coming down. That gives me my range. So I'll write them back and I'll say, I'm really interested in your project. These are the most interesting facets of it that I think we could really serve you well on, and we're a good fit for these reasons. And I think it's going to be 80 to 90 hours, or 150, or in this range, depending if it's value-based billing. Then they come to me and they say, okay, we'd like a proposal. At that point, I'll say to them, a proposal is similar to an architect's drawing. It's a full specification that's going to walk you step by step through our thinking processes and our strategy around your project. You can take this to any other web developer or designer and present it to them, and they won't have to do all the work. So I will give you this proposal, but if you don't hire us, you will have to pay for it. If you do hire us, maybe 6 months down the road, because you have a board of directors and it's a whole big thing back and forth, then you'll pay me for it now, and when you hire me, you'll get a discount off your project against the cost that you paid for that proposal. So that's how I handle that.
You mentioned value-based invoicing
Mm-hmm.
with some great examples,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you handle the other way around? That like the client thinks it's only worth $200 while you have to spend like 50 hours on it?
So sometimes, okay. So there's the client that complains because they think it's too expensive. And then there's the client, like you're talking about, that doesn't understand the value of what it is that you're providing them for. Correct?
It's more like, you mentioned like great examples where you get a lot more out of it because the client sells a lot
Right.
of value.
Right.
But you have to make sure that your client
Understands that. Correct, yes. And so sometimes they think, I had a example recently of someone that came to me and thought that the work that they were asking for, which was a migration from 1.5 to 3 and a brand new responsive template and the ability to sell tickets on their website, was worth $1,000.
So how?
So I actually had to grip them firmly and explain to them through evidence, of saying, this is what's involved. There are 400 configuration settings for a ticketing system. 400. So let's just say I go through and I configure each in 1 second, which is not possible, or 1 minute. This is what a base minimum is. And I said, now moving from this to that, as far as non-responsive to responsive, this is what's involved. You have how many browsers, how many devices. You have to resize your images and make sure it loads fast. So I give them all of the reasoning behind it. And usually by the end, now she's gone back to the board and said, we need this. I want to hire her. We need the budget for it. And said that they're planning to get started in February. But at first I was like, I literally got heat in my cheeks after I did all this, research and getting the information together. And she said $1,000 because she wouldn't give me her budget. Which is a whole conversation in and of itself. How do you get the budget out of the client? I start off a conversation with that. Do you have a budget? If they say no, then I step back and I say, okay, any project requires a budget. Just like buying a house. You can buy a trailer home or you can buy a mansion, but you need to know what you can spend. And it's the same in web development. You can have a mansion for our website. I mean, talk about Netflix or Amazon. I mean, these are examples of mansions. Or you can have a trailer home, which is like a one-page, business card website. Each will give you shelter from the cold. Each will provide you with water, but you need to know what your budget is. So I don't go forward, and it's easy, especially if you get a little lull in business, to feel like you have to, oh, let me work with you even if you don't have a budget, but they have to get to that place first. So don't trick yourself into thinking that that you can convince someone if they haven't come to that place themselves. So, yeah. Any other questions? Wonderful. So I put the slides where they were up there, and I think that's everything. This is my email address, my business phone, and where you can find me on social media if you want to get in touch, if you think of something later. Basically, the slides, if you go to my website and click on Musings, which is my newly launched blog, you'll find the newest thing about the Joomla World Conference there, and then from there you can click on Complete Slideshow, and it'll take you to SlideShare where you can download it. Thank you so much.